putting Christ back into Christmas? Let's talk about Christmas traditions. Most of the traditions were designed after pagan rituals. Most of the symbols represent something in the pagan rituals. For example, red and white symbolized a hallucinogenic mushroom that was used. Caroling came from a fertility rite ceremony. Decorating with greenery was initially done to celebrate the god of Saturn and to protect entrances from evil spirits. Ornaments represented the family patron deity or offerings which they tied to the tree. And circular wreaths were tied to doorways for protection. The birthday of the sun deity, Mithras, celebrated on the 25th, and that's why they picked the 25th. This was even going on during Jesus' time. Christians began observing most traditions about 325 to 350 years after Jesus. Did you know that God gave us an appointed time to celebrate Jesus' birth and his return? The Feast of Tabernacles is what God gave us to celebrate Jesus' birth and his return. The Feast of Booths, also known as the Feast of Tents, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Ingathering. So if you read these anywhere, they're all referring to the same appointed time. It was given to the Israelites more than 1,400 years before Jesus was born. All of God's appointed times represented something from the past, present, and the future times as it relates to God's timings. So when I'm saying present here, I mean the time between when Christ was born and when he returned. The past would be any time prior to when Jesus was born, and the future would be any time after he returned. It is written, "The Lord your God will bless you in all your produce, in all the works of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful." This was the reason he initially instituted this particular appointed time. When is this appointed time? It's on the 15th day of the 7th new moon when you gather in the fruit of the land. In the beginning, in Genesis, God said that he placed the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky to show us his appointed times. And you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahweh for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Celebrate it in the 7th new moon. How are we to celebrate it? On the 1st day is a rest, and on the 8th day is a rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the 1st day the fruits of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before Yahweh, your Elohim, for 7 days. This is a law forever in your generation. All who are native born in Israel dwell in booths. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessings of the Lord your God that he has given you. The Feast of Tabernacles, in regard to the past, the tabernacle was where God rested and dwelled among his people. The people were not just Israelites. It was a mixture of Israelites, Egyptians, and people who had joined them as they had been traveling. It was called a tent of meeting, and it was also called the place appointed to meet with the Lord. The whole function was, this is where we meet with the Lord. It was where the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night could be seen. When that cloud or fire lifted from the tabernacle, it was time for them to pack up because they were going to be moving. the Feast of Tabernacle for the present time? Jesus is believed to have been born during the Feast of Tabernacles because it is the only time in history when all the signs lined up perfectly. Jesus observed the Feast of Tabernacles. He did not observe the birthday of the sun god on the 25th, which was happening during his time. The disciples all observed the Feast of Tabernacles. Paul observed the Feast of Tabernacles, and he writes about it. And the early church, all the way until around 500 years after Jesus, observed the Feast of Tabernacles. Most Christians are familiar with the text from John talking about how the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, but there's much deeper meaning modern-day Christ followers do not understand. Here is the text in a literal translation. And the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, and we saw his esteem as of an only brought forth of the Father, complete in favor and truth. Those who walked at that time would have known exactly what John was trying to convey. They would have very quickly recalled the tabernacle of Moses and the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles. Pitched his tent. And the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, and we saw his esteem. Pitched his tent among us. Among us. That should bring up some type of recollection for you as well. It's right there, read in the Christmas story every year. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. The Feast of Tabernacles for the future. It is written, and I heard a loud voice from the heavens saying, See, the booth of Elohim is with men. Remember, booth means tabernacle. And he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim. So when you see this booth, you think of tabernacle. In modern day English, it would kind of sound more like, see, the tabernacle of God is with men. That is Jesus. It will be celebrated forever, just like God said. A law forever in your generations. This means we will be celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles even after Christ returns. Then the survivors from all the nations that have attacked Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, and to celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles was designed as a time for us to remember how God brought the Israelites out of bondage and dwelled among them, and how he sent the Word, Jesus, as flesh to dwell among us and to take us out of bondage, and that we will celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles for eternity with God, forever free. Here's another little known scripture where God addressed this exact situation. When the Israelites defeated an enemy, God told them, destroy completely all the places on the high mountains, on the hills, and under every spreading tree, where the nations you are disposing worship their gods. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and burn their poles in the fire. Cut down the idols of their gods, and wipe out their names from those places. You must not worship the Lord your God in their way. Be careful not to be ensnared by inquiring about their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods, and will we do the same? You must not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods, he was very adamant about if a people group worshiped a God in a specific way, to not take that way and change it so that it became something to worship him with. He told us how to worship. The question is, should we focus more on putting the Christ back into a tradition he didn't belong to, or putting a tradition back that he did belong to?